Ejiochi, and this is Burden of Proof, where we'll be covering high-profile cases, and we're starting out with the trial against former gang member Duane Keffe D. Davis, accused of orchestrating the murder of rapper Tupac. Attorneys Brian Buckmire and Bernarda Villalona are here, but before we get into the legalities, opening statements started today in Las Vegas as Davis faces a murder charge. The prosecution used statements made by Davis in interviews and excerpts from his memoir, which he now says were false, and he didn't write the memoir. Here's prosecutor Binu Palau.
Duane Davis says that if they were on his side, if Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot them himself. But because they were on the other side, he handed it to DeAndre Smith. DeAndre Smith, according to Duane Davis, did not want to shoot at that time, so Orlando Anderson shot into that car. Duane Davis explains this over and over again.
Meanwhile, the defense's opening statement focused heavily on the fact that Davis talked to police several times. Here's Davis's attorney, Michael Zamft.
You know what happened then? They didn't charge the case either. In 2009. Ask yourself the reason why that is. It's because they just didn't care about Tupac Shakur or his life? Or is it because they looked into it and realized we can't verify this information, we don't believe this to be true?
Davis is pleading not guilty. Our Alex Stone is at the Clark County Courthouse in Las Vegas with more on what happened in court today. Now, Alex, the prosecution and the defense, they both agree that Davis confessed to orchestrating the murder of Tupac Shakur. Should the jury believe him?
Well, I mean, this is what the jury is going to have to decide now, Ike. You've got both sides saying, oh, no, he completely confessed. But you've got one side saying, yeah, and that is what happened over the 30 years that he has said that he played a role in this and told police that he played a role in it, believing he had an immunity deal. That prosecutors say that immunity deal went away when he went public with his story, wrote a book, which now he says, well, he didn't really write that book, that somebody else wrote it. He just gave them the details, and then they embellished everything, and then he stuck with that story to try to sell books over the years and media interviews that he did, admitting to his role in this whole thing. So prosecutors are saying that was the truth over 30 years when he thought he had an immunity deal, and the defense is saying, no, that was just all to make money. Don't believe any of that, that this is now he is telling the truth when he says that he had nothing to do with it, that you can't even put him in Vegas that night. So the jury's going to have to hear both sides of this, both sides saying that, yeah, he admitted to it at one point, but was it a lie or was it the truth?
Now, Alex, we also heard testimony from two witnesses, including a former police officer. How did the jury react during today's proceedings?
Well, they were really listening and taking a lot of notes and really seemed to be honed in on what now two different police officers have said, and a witness as well, a second police officer on the stand this afternoon. Both the members of LVMPD, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. One was a patrol deputy on bicycle patrol on September 7th, 1996. The other being a homicide detective who responded to the scene. A lot of crime scene photos being shown today of blood inside that BMW. They looked at it. The photo's not too graphic, so they've been looking at them and not looking away from them. And then that witness that you talked about of a woman who just happened to be in the area with her girlfriends that night and heard the gunfire, and then police moved in.
All right, Alex Stone, thank you as always. So how are the two sides battling for an edge? All right, we're going to find out right now with a segment we're calling Lawyer Up. Let's bring in Brian Buckmire. He's a former homicide defense attorney, and Bernarda Villalona. She used to be a homicide prosecutor. Guys, I feel like we're in our own courtroom here today. I'm liking this, all right? I'll be the judge, make sure nothing bad happens here, okay? Bernarda, I want to start with you, okay? The prosecution's entire opening statement focused on Duane Davis's former interviews and, of course, his memoir right here, which he wrote back in 2019. Is that something you expected?
Oh, absolutely, because this case is heavily built for the prosecution on Keffe D's own statements, on the words that came out of his mouth, on the words that are on the papers of that book that he actually wrote. So I expected this because in terms of eyewitnesses, not really any eyewitnesses, because you know Suge Knight wasn't cooperative when this first occurred. Actually, he's still not cooperative now. So the only person that actually puts himself on the scene is the person who actually spoke about it, and that's Keffe D. Davis, along with the corroboration that the prosecution has been able to gather, hey, his own words did him in.
Now, I want to ask you this question. All right, you're a defense attorney. How do you convince a jury that a book that was written to sell copies and make money is completely different than omission under oath?
It's an issue of corroboration and credibility.
Right.
Right. And you kind of heard a bit of it when the defense gave their opening statement that if Keffe D had given this statement, which we all know he did years ago, then wouldn't law enforcement then follow up and check on that and make sure, okay, if he did say this and it was truthful, why don't they prosecute him then? And that's how they're going to play this off. They're going to say, if this was true, then why not then? Why now today? And if you can create a conspiracy theory around it and you got a person thinking, I got a little bit of doubt about this, not quite sure about that, that's a seed that will grow over the weeks of this trial, and hopefully for the defense, they'll lead to a not guilty.
Now, you're a defense attorney. I know a lot of the times your job is to prove that your client is being honest. But the defense attorneys, they're over here trying to prove that Davis was being a liar. So why go with that strategy?
So I've actually done this as well. Like,
Okay.
Sometimes you've got to throw your client under the bus and say, hey, he's a liar. You want to know why he's lying? He's a gang member. Like they lie about things. I mean, I would bring it into international politics as well, right? Are there times that countries say like, oh, we didn't do it or we did do it in order to further their agenda? What's Keffe D's agenda? Money. He's a former gang member trying to get out of the game. That's the agenda there.
Yeah, but was it money back in 2008 when he sat down for that proffer agreement? It wasn't about money at that point. I mean, the feds were looking into him because he sold some drugs, so he was trying to save himself. But that specific task force that interviewed him, we found out today doing an opening statement, they were actually investigating the death of Biggie Smalls. It wasn't even Tupac. And it was Keffe D that volunteered, hey, I don't have any information about Biggie's death, but I do have information about Tupac's death.
But here's the thing, the defense right now, they're saying that their argument, rather, for this entire case is that the prosecution, they lack hard evidence. They don't have a gun. They don't have any witnesses to point to the shooter. Do you think that's enough to prove a guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Look, Ike, I prosecuted cases. I was a homicide prosecutor for 10 years. And actually, my very first homicide that I tried here in Brooklyn, New York, was a cold case from over 20 years ago where there was no eyewitnesses, where we were dealing with the defendant's own statement as well as testimony from like the first officers that saw the two bodies and information like that. So we're going old school prosecution. And for the prosecutor, he's going to have to emphasize that we're dealing with the 90s and what was actually available then. We're asking you to judge this crime from 1996, not to look at it from a lens from 2026.
Even if there's no physical evidence there still?
No. Does it mean, so no gun was recovered? Does it mean Tupac wasn't shot?
Okay.
It doesn't change it. And actually, you'll be surprised. The majority of homicide cases, you never get the gun.
Okay. Now, the defense attorney, Zampt, right? He pointed out that, hey, listen, this book came out in 2019. Nothing happened in 2020. Nothing happened in 2021. Nothing happened all these years until now. So we're essentially seeing something where they're saying that why now and why not before? Is that enough?
I'm not sure if it's enough, but to go back to what we're all saying here, I think the defense has to and is doing in a sense. This is not a question. This trial is not a question of whether or not someone killed Tupac. We know they did. Someone did. The question is, and if the defense is doing a good job of it, is framing it is the prosecution doing their job in proving it? It's not for the jury to prove this. It's not whether or not it happened. It's whether or not this prosecutor, who dragged you into court and promised you that they'd prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, did their job. If they don't do their job, as the law enforcement has not done for the last 30 years, then this case is gone. And if you frame it like that, where it's like, don't do the work for them. Are they proving this case? No, they can't, because it's from 96. This bike cop doesn't know if he was the first to arrive in the scene or the last one. This person doesn't remember this. They're reviewing notes. They're getting information from the prosecutor while they're preparing for it. You put all of that in, that's reasonable doubt.
Is that enough? You think that's going to be successful?
Let me tell you, the strongest piece of evidence that as a prosecutor you can ever have is a defendant's own admission. And not one to law enforcement, because you can always argue, oh, the cops made him say what he said. The cops put pressure on him. The cops told him what to say. But here we have it different, because he said it on YouTube interviews. He said it on BT interviews. He said it to Vlad TV. And he's also written it on inside of this memoir. So it's not subject to coercion by cops. The strongest piece of evidence, aside from a video surveillance where you see the person actually committing the crime, is a person admitting to committing the crime.
Give me a second. Let me
This guy.
Bernarda, do
Here we
you
go.
say one thing when you're analyzing a case and maybe have a different argument when you're in court?
No, but this is but look, let's just be clear. Let's just be clear. What I'm doing as the prosecution, especially what the prosecutor is going to be doing here, you see how we have all these different versions with minor little tweaks about what actually happened that night, but the biggest material facts are consistent. That being, number one, he was in a gang. He's a Crip, right? Number two, his nephew was beaten inside of that hotel. Number three, they were seeking retaliation because you messed with my nephew. You gave him a big beating, and that's motive, actually, for them to go after Tupac. Number four, that they were in that white caddy. Number five, that he got that gun, which is really important here because since Keffe D is not the shooter. And number six, that he passed that gun to the actual shooter. And number seven, that they were driving around looking for Tupac and Suge. So all the other stuff, the little ingredients, the little seasoning, why it may differ, as long as those important facts do not differ, that's what makes out the crime here.
Yeah, but we already heard from the opening statement from the defense attorney that all that, no one's denying that.
Yeah.
But they're saying, hey, listen,
it took time.
Why now?
It took time.
So then how do you convince a jury to not make sure that defense strategy takes root?
So let me tell you. So number one, of course, this was all addressed during jury selection, and we got to hope that they pick the right jury for it, right?
Okay.
Because, trials are won and lost in jury selection. But number one, you emphasize that, of course, is a death, right? Life was taken. I don't care if it was Tupac or whatever the name is, it was a human being's life that was taken. Number two, justice delayed is not justice denied. Number three, you talk about accountability no matter how long it actually takes. But number four, more importantly, as a prosecutor, it's not about what you know. It's about what you can prove. In 1996, maybe they did know who the actual shooter was and who the people were involved. Maybe in 2000 they knew. 2008 they knew. They knew from the proffer. Again, it's not about what you know, it's what you can prove in a court of law. And they needed Keffe D. Davis to hang himself with all these interviews in order to build a strong enough case that they felt was strong enough to meet that burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt and to move forward with that prosecution.
Okay, Brian, I do want to ask you this question. Right? I want to switch gears a little bit. Nevada law, it says you do not have to pull the trigger in order to be convicted of murder. You just have to be proven that you're orchestrating it. The prosecution in this trial, they're trying to label Keffe D as the shot caller, the person that organized everything. How do you make that? Do you think that's going to be enough for a conviction when, again, I said it again, there's no murder weapon, there's no vehicle, there's not even an eyewitness to say that he did it? Is that going to be enough?
So to say this is a murder case is just an easy and simple way to kind of explain it, but really it's conspiracy to commit murder. And what the prosecution is saying here is it's in furtherance of gang activity. And what that allows them to do is bring in all of this gang activity, all this explanation as to who Orlando Anderson is, who the Crips are, who the Bloods are, what the East Coast, West Coast beef is, and then create this narrative that helps them drive that story home. But everything Bernarda is saying is true. And part of the joke when I took your cards and asked Bernarda, do we make arguments differently? Here on ABC, Bernarda gives you the most broadest set of information. You're going to understand the prosecution and the defense better than anyone else. But Bernarda and I, when we're in court, we're not doing that.
Yes.
We're defense attorneys
Right, we're defense
giving
attorneys.
our client the strongest argument. And I think I would make the same argument for Keffe D. When he's giving a proffer, he's giving a proffer. But here, he's telling the truth. Different audience, different reasons. That's the argument.
All right, we have some glossary terms here that I want to clear up. Proffer agreement. I know you guys are here lawyers.
Let's be clear. We got to fix that up. Yeah, proffer versus
Explain that,
immunity,
please.
because that's been just messed up all around. So with a proffer agreement, it allows a person to speak to a prosecutor, limiting how the prosecutor can use that statement. So normally you can't use that statement against that person, but what directly you get out of it, for example, other leads, you can use it. However, huge asterisk. If they can get that same information from outside of that proffer, which happened here, ding,
The book,
ding, ding.
the interviews, everything.
The interviews, all the videos and stuff, then the prosecutor can actually use that in a court of law. But also, a proffer does not preclude or prevent a prosecutor from going after you and prosecuting you. Hence, Nevada versus Duane Davis.
Why is Keffe D's lawyer agreeing to this agreement and then turn around and let him talk on interviews and books quickly? Why do you think he did that?
just you understand that there are good anchors on TV and bad anchors on TV. Shocker. I don't know if you could see me. There are good defense attorneys and there are bad defense attorneys. It's for every profession.
His words, not mine. And me trying to be a good anchor, I got to toss this. Bernarda, Brian Buckmire, thank you. Stick around. We got a lot more coming up next. We're going to speak with the author who wrote the most acclaimed true crime book on Tupac's murder, what she knows about the evidence, and what happened 30 years ago. Back to Burden of Proof on a day nearly 30 years in the making. Opening statements and testimony started today in the trial of Duane Keffe D. Davis in a Las Vegas courtroom. Prosecutors allege that Davis orchestrated the killing of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur back in 1996, and Davis has pleaded not guilty. Joining me now with more is best-selling author Kathy Scott, who wrote the seminal true crime book, The Killing of Tupac Shakur. Kathy, thank you for joining us on Burden of Proof. Listen, you've been following this crime since the beginning, so what's it like for you to see this now playing out in a courtroom all of these years and decades later?
I love it. It's about time. I mean, it's the evidence was all there. It was just a matter of not following up on a lot of things. And then the new sheriff came to town, and not to town, but he got promoted, he got elected, and he decided to cover it. One good thing, Keffe D moved to Vegas. He moved to Henderson, right next door, and they got him walking down the street. They didn't have to extradite him from LA, so that made it really easy for them to do it.
Now, Davis is the only person ever charged in relation to Tupac's death. With what you know about the investigation and the evidence, why do you think it took so long to arrest anyone?
Well, there wasn't a sense when I interviewed everybody, cops and all the way up to captain and the sheriff as well. But I kept saying, what's going on? How come you guys aren't? How come nothing's been filed? Nobody's been charged. They had witnesses, Frank Alexander, who was, a homeboy of Suge and Tupac, and he saw the white caddy. He saw the brown arm come out of the window and go rat-a-tat-tat. They have a bullet, which is a Glock 45, and caliber, and there was no interest in one high-level person. I won't identify the level. Told me that a big trial like that in Vegas would be bad for tourism. And there was no desire at the time. And one cop turned off his message machine and stopped taking calls from the media. So there just didn't seem to be a desire. It was very unusual. It's the reason I wrote the book.
Rat-a-tat-tat. Kathy, I got to start upping my language there. I want to ask you a question about
I'm stained.
I see. Now, listen, Tupac's shooting death, that's always going to be linked to Biggie Smalls, which happened just 6 months later. And it also remained an unsolved case. Now, you wrote a book about Biggie's murder, too. So how intertwined were Biggie and Tupac, both in their careers and in their untimely deaths?
Well, they were friends. Tupac helped Biggie. When Tupac would play venues, he brought Biggie on the stage with him. They were friends. And then it was Quad Studios that started the East Coast, West Coast rap war, because Tupac was going in there, and a bunch of guys, and Tupac and his buddies, his homies, they all were wearing all these chains, gold chains all over their necks. And so they walked into Quad Studios on the upper east side, I think it is, of Manhattan. I went there, and they got, right as they were going in, they got jumped, and their jewelry was stolen. And Tupac reached for his gun in his belt and shot himself, and I won't say where. And those guys ran, and that case was never solved. And Tupac, he was on parole, and he had to go to jail the next day. And he was told, and they, after he went to the hospital, they took him straight to the jail. He was told in the jail that, hey, it was Biggie. Biggie was behind it. And Tupac believed it. That was the start of the East Coast, West Coast war. And it's a shame.
Remember Robert De Niro's character in Casino. Do not be too flashy. Kathy Scott, thank you as always. All right, after the break, we pivot to other legal cases on the docket. Lindsay Clancy's mother takes the stand as Clancy stands accused of killing her 3 children. What she's saying about her daughter's state of mind at the time. Attorneys Brian and Bernarda, they're back with us. All right, here's a quick look at the other big court cases on the docket. Also today, the defense calling witnesses to the stand after the prosecution rested in its case in the high-profile Lindsay Clancy trial. Clancy's mother taking the stand and testifying that her daughter told her and her then-husband, Patrick Clancy, that she was having thoughts of harming her children weeks before the killings occurred. Testimony is set to resume tomorrow morning. And the judge in the Luigi Mangione case has given prosecutors until October 9th to respond to Luigi Mangione's motion to dismiss his state murder indictment. Last week, he pleaded guilty to his federal charges in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Brian and Bernarda, what do you think about this new development, the differences between the state and the federal case? What's going on over there?
I'm disappointed in the actions by the federal prosecutors because the goal is to seek justice. So if the goal is to seek justice, the feds, after they lost the count that allowed him to pursue the death penalty, they should have dismissed the case and let the state prosecution go forward, because you would have gotten justice and accountability in the sense that a murder 2 conviction would have gave you 15 years to life minimum, maximum 25 years to life. So I think this was a disservice to the family by the feds going forward.
What's your take on this, Brian?
For me, I'm looking at it in terms of this motion to dismiss the case, right? And this is how I think about it. I think it's a long shot, but do I think it's a great argument? Absolutely. I think the argument, this is double jeopardy not because stalking and murder in the second degree, especially the stalking resulting in death, aren't the same, but it's like 2 different kind of evils or harms that they're trying to distinguish. If Mangione teams win this, I thought the Agnifilo Christmas party last year was big after the Diddy win. I think this would be even bigger because this is legal chess in a way that I haven't seen before. And I think it could be a big win for them. But I do think it's a big if. I think it's going to be difficult. And if they miss their mark, they've got to do a trial where your client's already pled guilty down the street and said he did this.
Exactly.
So what do you see happening?
So if they lose on a double jeopardy ground, of course, then the case, I think, will go to trial. And I think that the defense is going to go with the extreme emotional disturbance.
All right. Thank you. Bernarda Villalona, Brian Buckmire. We'll do this again soon, all right? Sounds good. And thank you for joining us. I'm Ike Ejiochi. We'll be live every weekday with new episodes right here on ABC News Live, 5:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. And if you missed any parts of today's episodes, you can check it out on demand on Disney+, Hulu, or wherever you listen to podcasts by searching Burden of Proof. See you later.